Good morning, Connection. How is everybody doing? As you probably have noticed by now in the first few seconds, I am not in my usual location at the church, and I'll explain to you about that in a little bit. But this is a familiar setting for those of you who join with us on Wednesday nights. It's Pastor D.E. and Brandy's house. So let's just go ahead and start today with, before we do this, the morning blessing, let me explain that Pastor D.E., as everyone knows, he is back in school now. He is a schoolboy at 47 again. And so he is in a class this morning. He's going to try to join us via remote at the end. But if not, we know he is doing something very, very, very important. So let's begin with our morning blessing this morning, as we do every week. Spirit of truth, we come to you today to declare these intentions that we as a corporate body are focusing on this year. We have joyful, energetic bodies. We have loving, compassionate hearts. We have restful, alert minds. And we experience lightness of being in all things. It is our intention today and for the rest of this year to replace any resistance, disorder, effort, or struggle with gentleness, clarity, health, eagerness, love, joy, and freedom as our natural state. It is our prayer, our intention, and our heart's desire to be fully awake today and always. We believe it, we perceive it, and now we receive it in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen. And so it is. Okay, we're going to begin with a few quotes this morning. First, to damage the sovereignty of the individual is to replace a community inspired by love, benevolence, and beauty by another based solely on power. Anwar Sadat said that. I believe he was the prime minister of Egypt. Next, man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was a famous French philosopher. Next, self-reverence, self-knowledge, self-control. These three alone lead life to sovereign power. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Be honest with yourself as to why you're choosing to do a particular thing. Then do it gladly, knowing that you are always getting to do what you want. The statement, I have no choice, is a lie. You can choose. You simply do not prefer the alternatives available to you for whatever reason. So you inevitably select the outcome you most prefer. And that was one by Neil Donald Walsh. Next, live today. Let go of your attachment to your past as an excuse for your life conditions today. You are a product of the choices you are making right now. Dr. Wayne Dyer. And lastly, love is heaven and fear is hell. Where you place your attention is where you will dwell. Alan Cohen. Okay. First, I want to just give a short little apology for last week. I know that we were having some internet connection issues at the church, which we are still in the process of resolving, which is why I am here today. And I know that we had to stop and then we had to restart, and the final edited form of the video was not up online till later in the evening last week. So I apologize for any inconvenience, but it was not for lack of anything we had done on our end. Brandy and especially Benny Grizel had worked tirelessly trying to get it back up and running, and we are still doing that for Sunday. But I know it was a little bit of inconvenience, so I want to thank you for all of you who stayed with me till the end for your patience. And I hardly ever do this, but I'm going to plug myself and say that if you weren't able to stay with me till the end, please go back and watch that teaching online. I think that it's probably one of the most important teachings I've ever given. And I was really excited to give it, as I am the one today. And today's teaching kind of picks up in a way on where that one left off. But if you didn't see that yet, don't worry. I'll make enough references. You'll know, it'll make sense to you. But I think that it's a really important teaching last week for you to go back and watch if you haven't. It gave an important concept about how religion has shaped and influenced us by what it has emphasized and by what it has not emphasized. and what it has allowed us to see and where it has directed our attention to for centuries, and how the perception of Jesus, our perception of Jesus, as well as our perception of ourselves, might have been different had the events in his life and ministry been emphasized in a different way, or different events and in his life and ministry been emphasized by the church. So I also want to make a slight correction from last week. I said that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the first woman Supreme Court justice, and of course she was not. I am fully aware that Sandra Day O'Connor was the very first female Supreme Court justice, but I suppose I just had Ruth Bader Ginsburg on my mind because of her recent passing. So I wanted to just make that little correction. So today, the title of my teaching is Thieves in the Temple. And yes, I'm going to read you the lyrics, some of the lyrics, not all of them, to that song, which is by Prince. Here we go. It says, "Love, come quick. Love, come in a hurry. There are thieves in the temple tonight. They don't care where they kick, just as long as they hurt you. There are thieves in the temple tonight. Love, if you're there, come save me from all this cold despair. I feel like I'm looking for my soul, like a poor man looking for gold. Love, come quick. Love, come in a hurry. There are thieves in the temple tonight." So what did my brother talk about on Sunday? The journey to you. And, we're all searching for our true selves, like this song says, poor men searching for gold, which I would assume would be pretty desperately. But why and how have we lost our souls? Why do we need to be looking for them? We'll get to that a little later. There's another old song. This one is very definitely not by Prince, but I was thinking about it yesterday as I was studying. It's an old church song called "The World Didn't Give It to Me and the World Can't Take It Away." So what is it that they're referring to there? What is it that we have that the world can't take away unless we allow it to? Well, the answer, according to black gospel music or Shirley Caesar, would be "This joy that I have." That's how her song goes. "This joy that I have, the world didn't give it and the world can't take it away." According to white gospel music, which is the Gaither family, it's "This happy face that I'm wearing." So there's two different versions of that song. But my answer to that would be what we have that the world didn't give us, that the world can't take away, is our personal sovereignty over ourselves, also known as the power of choice, free will, which was given to us by our Creator, thus not the world. It is a divine gift, and it's the greatest power, I believe, that we possess as humans. Love is the greatest power in the universe, but the greatest power we possess as humans is this power of choice. And so we're going to talk today about, these thieves. My title, Thieves in the Temple. There are thieves that are trying to steal this personal sovereignty, our power to choose for ourselves the life that we will live, the way that we will behave, the things that we believe. We're going to talk today about who these thieves are and what their purpose is for wanting to take our power of choice from us, which you can probably already guess has to do with money and control. And these thieves are slick. They don't walk up to us and put a gun to our heads and say, "Give up your free will and power of choice or else." They actually convince us many times without our even being aware of it to freely give up this power ourselves. We're going to talk about how they do that. So as part of last week's teaching, I asked this question: who is deciding what reality is? And more importantly, why do we think it is more realistic to be negative and have low expectations than to be positive and expect the best? Who has convinced us that life must be hard and that struggle is required in order for us to have good things come to us? And my answer, My answer to that, which was also the answer of a man named William Henry, whose work and research I shared with you last week, my answer is twofold, as was his. It is culture, and our religion. Our religion says, how dare you believe you can even come close to matching the vibration and level of consciousness of a being of love and light such as Jesus. And we discussed last week at some length how the church, after it merged with the Roman Empire and subsequently took on the agenda of the Roman Empire, which was to control its subjects, guided us much more often toward images of the very human, bloody, and tortured, some would say defeated, Jesus on the cross, rather than to images of the glorious, transcendent, mystical Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Excuse me. Okay, so in both of these events in Jesus's life, the crucifixion and resurrection, which I'm counting that whole process as one event, and his transformation into a being of pure light, where Elijah and Moses, both physically dead, just materialized in front of Peter, James, and John on the Mount of Transfiguration. In both of these events, Jesus ascended or transcended from being a human, as it were, in human form, to a divine form or state. And I describe those two events as one being the hard way and one being the easy or easier way. The hard way was physical torture, shedding of blood, death, and the easier way was a mental shift in perception and perspective, an acknowledgement in Jesus's mind that he was already divine, and all he had to do was walk out of or away from his flesh in order to achieve a divine level of consciousness. I also pointed out the fact that, in my opinion, if Peter, James, and John had been able to grasp the concept of what he did on the Mount of Transfiguration and had accepted that they too had the ability to transcend in the same manner he did, that the crucifixion and resurrection, the hard way, would have been unnecessary. But since they didn't, he then had to speak to them and all of the rest of humanity at that time as well in the only language they seemed to be able to understand at that point in their evolution, which was the language of blood, or the shedding of his blood. I said then, and I will repeat, Jesus never said or taught that without the shedding of blood there is no remission of sin. That was Moses and Abraham and all them. Jesus wanted to show them a new way. He was all about a new way concerning everything that his religion was teaching. But they didn't understand, or not fully anyway. They couldn't let go of, again, not fully, the old way of doing things, the hard way. So he had to do it that way in order to convince them that they were reconciled to God. So that was last week. We focused on this part of the question: who has convinced us that it's holy to suffer, and that life must be hard and struggle is required in order to have good things come to us? And the part of the answer we focused on last week was the religion part. Today, we're going to shift to the part of the question that asked, who is deciding what reality is? Who says? Who says it has to be this way? And the part of the answer we'll be focusing on now is the other half, culture. So our culture is what it is that is largely deciding and dictating to us what reality is. And instead of us standing on and believing in the reality that we are divine beings who have come here to earth to have a temporary human experience, we are allowing the thieves in the temple to take that reality from us. Or more accurately, as I said earlier, we have allowed them to convince us to give up that version of reality, and we have let them replace it with a different version of reality, like We are helpless. We are human. We have all of this limitation. So let's go back now to the idea and concept of personal sovereignty, our most precious possession, the gift of free will and the ability to make decisions for ourselves, autonomy, that thing that makes us God-like. The ability to create, especially our own lives, is what makes us God-like. So who or what are these thieves that we willingly give our power to and thereby lose our personal sovereignty and diminish our own godlikeness? There are many, but I'm only going to give you a few examples today. Now, before I give these examples, let me remind you that there are always two sides to every coin, and the things I will mention have their positive aspects as well as the negative ones, as everything here in this earthly realm does. Here, we live in duality, and we recognize both the good and bad aspects of everything. But it's not the good and positive aspects of these things that are jeopardizing our personal sovereignty. It's the negative ones. So that's what I'll be highlighting today for the purposes of this teaching. In another teaching at another time, I will sing their praises. So just bear with me. The first thief of our personal sovereignty that I want to talk about is what is known as the world of academia, which is a little different than education. One of the definitions of education is an enlightening experience, and that's always good. Anytime you learn something new, it's a positive thing. But you can have an enlightening or educational experience almost anywhere from anybody in any situation. Opportunities to learn new things are literally everywhere. Another definition, though, and interestingly enough, it's the first one listed in the dictionary, is the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or a university. So here we're talking about strictly in a classroom setting with a teacher, a certified teacher, and students. So that's a little more formal and closer to what I would consider what I'm calling academia, which is defined as the environment or community concerned with the pursuit of research, education, and scholarship. The difference, in my opinion, is that an emphasis on education is just that, learning or teaching in whatever way is best suited to the student. There are all kinds of ways that people learn. I think we've talked about this before. There are 7 different styles of learning. Auditory, musical, where you hear best by listening. Visual and spatial, where you learn through pictures, images, and spatial understanding. Verbal, where you prefer to learn best through reading. That's my style. Logical and mathematical, physical and kinesthetic, where you learn by actually doing things with your hands by experience. Then there's social and interpersonal learning, where you learn best from your peers or in a group setting. And finally, solitary and intrapersonal, where you shut yourself away and prefer to be self-taught or do it all by yourself. And so each of us learns best through one of these styles. One of these is our main style that we learn through. And education takes this into consideration and focuses on what's best and most advantageous to the student. The world of academia, however, is a different story and has a different focus. In that world, everything is centered around the teacher or the professor, and it's usually their way or the highway. There's not much leeway given. In those settings, which I think unfortunately exist in most of our universities, the student and how they learn is a secondary consideration. The teacher is motivated much more by what will advance his or her personal career and requires that each student adjust their learning style to his or her teaching style rather than the other way around. In classes led by teachers like this, the student's greatest education is, how do I please this instructor and get a passing grade? Or how do I do things in a manner that this professor wants it so that I can get the grade that I want? And that is a system that teaches students how to conform and manipulate more than anything else. So, kids are born wanting to be honest and to tell the truth and be true to themselves. But very soon we teach them that doesn't always get them very far, no matter how much we give lip service to, honesty is the best policy. No matter how much we say that, so often, if they find themselves continually being punished for being true to themselves, then and for not conforming to what the teacher or what their parents do in the exact way their authority figures say they want them to do it, then they get punished. I was talking last week to Larry Riley, one of our members, and he told me a pretty funny little story about his 4-year-old son. He said he came downstairs one morning and he noticed that his son had different pajama pants on from the night before. So he said, what's up, Trey? He said, why did you change your pajama pants? And Trey said, I didn't change my pajama pants, Daddy. And he said, well, I think you did. He said, did you wet the bed? And he said, no, Daddy, I didn't wet the bed. So upon further inspection, when Larry went upstairs, he had in fact wet the bed. So then he said, Trey, why did you lie to me? And he said, he just looked straight forward at him and said, because I didn't want you to know. And so, obviously, that little boy is going to outgrow very shortly his bedwetting stage. But what he might not outgrow, unfortunately, is that ability to just be honest. He already has to some degree. He lied twice before he told the truth. But unfortunately, any child that is consistently in a system where they get punished for telling the truth or being true to themselves, and they get rewarded for doing it someone else's way, even if they know that intuitively that's not what's best for them or that's not how they learn the best, then they're going to conform. So, although it's very subtle, that, in my opinion, is one of the thieves in our culture of our personal sovereignty, this worship that we have of academia and the importance we place on college degrees. And even though that system, in my opinion, is most of the time, they do not give the students enough latitude to kind of question what the status quo is. Now, in saying that, am I anti-college? Am I anti-college degrees? No, of course I'm not. But I also know that they are not the end-all, be-all of what true education is, especially because of this process that you have to go through in order to get them, this indoctrination. So education, I think, should be about teaching people, children in particular, how to think, not just what to think. Now, where have we heard that before? It should be more than just memorize this, this, and this, and learn how to write a paper, give the presentation the way your teacher prefers. Religion and spirituality. In fact, if you notice, I mentioned that phrase that my brother often says. Religion tells you what to think. Spirituality teaches you or tells you how to think. It's the same thing with education, okay? When we make a religion, though, of education by teaching people what to learn instead of how to learn, then it becomes just that, a religion, the religion of academia, to which many people just give their power away. Okay. Second thief, and closely related to this first one, the medical establishment. I love you, doctors. You are necessary. However, again, there is a certain segment of society that has made a religion of medicine rather than regarding it as what it is called, a practice. I've talked quite a bit recently about the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, and there was very little actual science and medicine during that time. It was more superstition and prayer that were relied on when it came to people's health, maintaining their health. But when the pendulum swung away from that, it swung too far, and it has never come back to the balance of the middle. Just like people used to unquestioningly, and some still do, follow pastors and priests and other spiritual leaders, now some people have just replaced that with doctors. They've put doctors up in that place, and they act as if they can never be questioned. But the fact is, we should not blindly follow doctors any more than we blindly follow pastors. Should we trust that they, in either case, have studied to show themselves approved in their respective fields and know more than we do about certain subjects? Yes, but ultimately, you know you better than anyone else. And if anyone tells you to do something or take a certain medication or follow a certain treatment and it doesn't resonate with you, no matter how many letters they have behind their name, you should probably pause for just a second and give it a second look. It's okay to get a second opinion or a third or a fourth or however many it takes until you feel comfortable with whatever the resolution or solution is. So we have become a pill and medication obsessed culture, to say the least. All you have to do is watch television and see that every other commercial is about a new medication to know that. Modern medicine has done great things to advance how we care for ourselves and has given us options that previous generations never even dreamed of. But now it's almost like we think pills or surgery or other treatments can cure anything. And so we don't even try to address whatever the issue is in any other way first, such as our diet, our exercise, or taking a look at how our emotions have contributed to the condition. We just go to the doctor, accept whatever he or she tells us without question, get a prescription, take the pills, many of which only deal with the symptoms and do nothing to alleviate the underlying cause. Also, many of which cause more issues and give you more symptoms, which in turn you are prescribed more medication for, and it just becomes a vicious and expensive cycle. Remember, I said most of this thievery is about money and control. When we give all of our power over to a doctor, instead of considering them a helpful partner in the way we are in charge of our own health care, then we rob ourselves of our personal sovereignty. Okay, third and final thief I'll discuss today, and this one is more insidious than the first two put together by far. I watched a documentary on Netflix yesterday called The Social Dilemma, which, although heartbreaking, sobering, and frightening, I highly recommend that all of you watch it if you can. I also read an article on the same topic, which I'll quote from as well, and it's called A Practical Guide to Taking Back Your Power from Social Media by a man named Asaf Hanukkah. One of the questions I said we'd focus on today is, who is deciding what reality is? And the answer to that in 2020 is most definitely the content creators on social media. Social media, no matter what it started out as, has become the biggest thief there is of our personal sovereignty. And the irony that I'm communicating this to you today via social media has not been lost on me. But as I stated in the beginning, everything I'll talk about today also has its positive or upside. But we need to take a look just for a moment at the other side so that we can understand the magnitude of what has been happening to our culture and to us over the past few decades, the last 10 years in particular. We'll start with the article and then go into the documentary with my comments interspersed throughout. It says, tech companies, especially companies that are incentivized by maximizing your attention, such as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, etc., are prioritizing their agenda over your mental health by covertly manipulating your choices and altering your behavior. Most people vastly underestimate the ways tech companies have infiltrated our lives without us even knowing it. Everyone has had the experience of logging on to social media to do something specific, then waking up an hour later wondering where the time went. That's the opposite of choice, or as we're talking about today, personal sovereignty. That's you being manipulated by an algorithm optimized to have you spend as much time as possible on the platform. You might think you decide, and you might even think you are programming the algorithm with your choices. But in reality, there are powerful supercomputers working to hook you into going down rabbit holes, all the while making you think it's what you want. Companies like Google and Facebook are some of the wealthiest and most successful of all time. They have relatively few employees. They just have this giant computer that rakes in the money. So the question is, how are they doing this? Who is paying them and for what? Those really are good questions that we need to be asking. During the first 50 years of Silicon Valley, the industry produced products like hardware and software and sold them to customers. It was nice, simple, straightforward business. In contrast, for the last 10 years, the biggest companies in the business have been in the business of selling their users. Because the public doesn't pay for the products like Facebook and Twitter and other social media, it's the advertisers who pay for them. Therefore, the advertisers are the customer, and we're the thing being sold. There's a classic saying, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. A lot of people think Google is just a search engine and Facebook is just a place to keep up with my friends. But what they don't realize is the vicious handwriting. The various advertisers who are paying for it all are the actual customers of these companies. And their business model is to keep for as long as they can. Their goal is to figure out how to get as much of a person's attention as is possible. The thought process is, how much time can we get you to spend? And how much of your life can we get you to give to us? Think about that statement for a minute. Like I said, it's not like anybody's putting a gun to our head. They're just convincing us very subtly to give. It can be a noble thing to give your life for something, to ultimately give your, but this, who are now in their early 20s, is the first to have had access to social media during the turbulent years of middle school, and how that has affected the way they view and how they experience relationships and connect to others. And more importantly, how all of that is being paid for by these companies, these advertisers. It says, in this world that's been created by social media, anytime two people connect, the only way it's financed is through a sneaky, imperceptible third party who is paying money to manipulate those two people. So, we've created globally an entire generation who were raised in a context where the very meaning of communication in their culture is based on manipulation. We've put deceit and sneakiness at the absolute center of all our connection and interaction with others. What's that song about? You build your house, you either build your house on the rock or you build your house on the sand. When we build our house on this sneaky manipulation, deceit, it's not a firm foundation. When you think about how these companies work, it starts to make sense. There are all these services on the internet that we think of as free, but they're not. They're paid for by the advertisers. Now, this made me think of the concept again of that whole idea of without the shedding of blood, there's no remission for sin. It's this idea that we're basing so much of our lives on. There has to be a sacrifice. Somebody has to pay. Nobody can just give freely as Jesus gave his life freely. That's a completely different way of giving. This thing we're all basing so much of our culture on now is an earthly 3D limited view of that whole blood has got to be demanded. Somebody must pay. That nothing is free thought process is not based in love. Giving freely is based in love. All right, back to the documentary. Why do advertisers pay those companies? They pay them money in exchange for showing us their ads. We're the product, or rather our attention that they are selling to the advertisers in exchange for the money. Or, said another way, What's being sold is the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in our behavior and perception. That is the product. Their goal is to change how we think, who we are, and what we do. That's the part to me that was frightening. That is their ultimate goal, controlling what we do and how we behave and what we want, so that we spend more and more time on social media so that they can sell us more and more products. All right, it's kind of like the story of the frog who's in the kettle of boiling water, but it's not boiling yet. He's all right at the beginning. It's like, oh, he's just swimming around in the water. And slowly but surely, somebody starts turning the heat up. And by the time it's boiling, it's too late for him to jump out. That's what's happening to us. All right. The next thing they talk about is how these platforms should be thought of as tools for our use. That's how we should think of them. We've talked before about this concept as it relates to our minds, that our minds, we shouldn't let our minds run the show, that we should just learn how to set our minds aside when we don't need them because they're in duality, and that we should follow our heart. Well, that's the same concept. The documentary said no one got upset when bicycles were invented. No one said, oh my God, we just ruined society. These bicycles are negatively affecting us. They're pulling people away from spending time with their kids. They're ruining the fabric of our democracy. People can no longer tell what's true. None of that was ever said about a bicycle. Because if something is a tool, it's genuinely just sitting there waiting patiently with no agenda of its own for you to use it when you need it. But when that thing ceases just being a tool, it's when it begins demanding things from you, like your attention, like your interaction, when it begins seducing and manipulating you. We have now moved away from having a tool-based technology environment where we use it for our own purpose as we find it necessary, to an addiction and manipulation-based technology environment. That's what has changed. Social media isn't a tool just sitting there waiting to be used. It has its own goals, which are always based on making money for its customers, the advertisers. And in order to do this effectively, it uses your own psychology against you. This is one of the men that was being interviewed, what he said. What I want people to know is that everything you're doing online is being watched, is being tracked, is being measured. Every single action you take, every click is being carefully monitored and recorded, down to exactly what images you stop and look at and how long you look at it. The way they know when people, this way, they know when people are lonely, they know when people are depressed, they know when people are looking at photos of ex-romantic partners, they know what you're looking at late at night as well as first thing in the morning. They know whether you're an introvert or an extrovert and what kind of neuroses you have. They know what frightens you. They now have more information about all of us than has ever been imagined in human history. It is unprecedented. And so my question to that is, what are they doing with this information? What are they using it for? Our good? To help us heal and evolve? Absolutely not. That's not what they're using it for. It's to their benefit to keep us angry and sad and frightened and addicted as much of the time as they can, because that gives them the power and it allows them to sell us more stuff to make us feel better. And this was confirmed by one of the guys that was interviewed when off camera, the cameraman during this interview, and they left it in the documentary, actually said, "You're making me feel like a lab rat." And the guy answered, "You are a lab rat. We all are. But it's not like we're lab rats in pursuit of developing a cure for cancer. It's not like these companies in any way are trying to benefit us or to further the evolution of mankind for the good. We're just the zombies that they want and need to show more ads to so they can make more money." So, the last area we'll talk about concerning social media is how it has changed our perception of reality by this hyper customization of what we are directed to see by them. Just like we talked about last week, how the art, even the pieces of art that the church chose to emphasize shaped the reality of how we see Jesus and in turn how we see ourselves. This is the same concept. Social media effectively now controls what we see, and therefore they shape our perception of reality. We talk a lot about the good side of creating our own reality. But when we give our power away, if we're not creating our own reality, when we give our power away, then we lose that ability. All right, so last thing I'm going to read from the documentary. It says, when you go to Google and type in, what is climate change, you're going to see different results depending on where you live. In certain cities, you'll get the information that climate change is a hoax. In others, you'll get the answer, climate change is disrupting the planet or causing the destruction of nature. Getting different answers based on your location is a function not of what the truth is, but it's all about where you are Googling from, as well as the particular things Google already knows about your interests. Even two friends who are close to each other emotionally as well as geographically, and may even have the exact same set of friends, can have very different social media experiences. You may think you're seeing basically the same updates as everyone else, but it's not like that at all. Each different user sees a completely different social media world because each user's customized experience is based on these computers deciding what is perfect for each of them. Each person has access to their own reality with their own facts. Are you beginning to see now how and why society has become what it has become? When we all begin to operate on a different set of facts, we lose our ability to reckon with or even consume any information that contradicts the worldview that's been created by those facts, which means we also lose our ability to be objective, constructive, and to think critically. Now, this is not the same thing as everybody having their own truth, okay? That's a different subject entirely. Everybody does have their own truth and sees through their own lens. What this is talking about, the major objective facts. We are now not even seeing the same things because we have allowed social media to so customize what we are interested in so that it will keep our attention. We're not even on an even ground of looking at the same facts, okay? So, a constant question that's being asked right now in the world is, how did we as a nation and how did we as a world get so polarized? We wonder why. Well, here's your answer. You assume that people on the other side from you and who disagree with you are just stupid or prejudiced or whatever, because how could they not come to the same or at least similar conclusions or understand your point of view when they're seeing the same information you're seeing? But the point is, they're not. That's the whole game. I challenge you to choose one cable news network and watch it exclusively for a month without flipping to another channel. And you'll see what I mean. We're not all working with the same information. And that has been done on purpose. We've all been driven further and further away from the center, from the middle way, which is where the common ground and the room to compromise is. We've all been driven away from that to either one extreme or the other. And the bottom line is we now have less and less control over who we really are and what we really believe as a result. So let's think about this for a minute. The battle that these companies are waging is for our focus and attention, because as we know, our focus and our attention are very powerful. The reason these advertisers pay a lot of money to purchase our attention and focus is because they are so valuable. We've got to stop giving something that valuable away to thieves. And when, going back to the song Thieves in the Temple, it's not talking about a church building. It's talking about this temple. The temple of our consciousness is what they're stealing from. We are each as responsible for what we focus on and give our attention to as we are for the words that are coming out of our mouths. The key is taking back that responsibility. That's also how we take back our power, because that's where the power is, in choosing through our personal sovereignty what we're going to focus our attention on. We talked last week a little bit about these things called transfiguration icon paintings that were specially created to enable a visceral encounter with a holy being, or to make present a spiritual energy. Just like social media, these paintings were created to be interactive, okay? But the paintings were done for a positive purpose. Social media is largely for a negative purpose. They were also referred to, these paintings, as sacred mirrors. The concept of the mirror explains the technology, interesting that they use this word in light of the other information we've discussed today, of icons. So the mirror explains the technology of the icons. The word icon comes from the Greek icon, and which means icon, E-I-K-O-N. And that word means image, likeness, or portrait. So in effect, when it says in the Bible that we as humans are made in the image and likeness of God, we could also say that we are living icons that work in much the same way as these transfiguration portraits did. When used, this is the way it works. It works like this. When used as a verb, the word mirror can either be a noun, which is the physical thing that is a mirror. It can also be used as a verb, such as I mirrored her actions. The word reflect also has two meanings. It can mean for you to see yourself in an object like a mirror, or it can also mean to reflect on, to meditate on, to ponder on, to think about. So we engage, the way it works is we engage with this transfiguration icon, which, this interactive piece of art, which then causes us to reflect in the sense of meditating on it until we ourselves become like it. We talked about that last week. If you can see it, you can be it. Then we use reflection in its other sense. We mirror back or send out that light and energy we have received into our being, out into the world for others to see, where they can see it reflected in themselves and be changed by it. We bring sacred energy into us by focusing our attention. Then we reflect on it within ourselves, gain insight from it, and then we become that mirror of insight for other people. So what an utterly beautiful way for us to assist in raising each other's vibration and transforming our world. We've talked about often before. Last week, my brother said it. It's not my journey to me to change you, and it's not your journey to you to change me. I can't change you and you can't change me, but what we can do is be this sacred mirror for each other. All right, I want to end today by reading an excerpt from my brother's sermon this past Sunday. No, it wasn't this past Sunday. This was from a couple weeks ago called, I love the title of this one, Watch Your Mind, Watch Your Mouth. And so he was talking about the story of David and Goliath. And at the end of that story, David uses Goliath's own sword to cut off his head. So if you look at it, this is my brother talking now, I'm quoting. So if you look at it, the very thing that could have killed David, he is now using to kill his enemy. The thing that tried to kill David in the past is now protecting him. Likewise, it's the same in our lives. The thing you thought came to kill you only came to make you stronger. The thing that once threatened you is now the wisdom that's protecting you in this next season. I believe when we get through this season that we will look back and see that the coronavirus may have seemed like an enemy, but there will be a protection for us in the future. There will be wisdom that we gained in this season. There will be an awakening during this time of isolation that will protect us in the future. Corona is reminding us that we are all one. This thing that we thought came to kill us, we will live to see the day when Goliath's sword will actually begin to protect us. So he was talking that particular day about the virus, but that whole idea of what he's talking about works for what I'm talking about today as well. The focus and the attention and the power we've been giving away to these thieves and others that exist, our personal sovereignty, that if we continue giving away will be the sword that destroys us, is the very same sword that will become our protection and our strength if we take it back into our own hands. Amen. So, Miss Brandy, do we have him?
Oh, no.
Okay. So Pastor DE thought that he might be able to be done with his class in time to give an ending. He is not. So what I'm going to do right now is read some shouts out. Do I have them on my phone?
You do.
All right, here we go. I want to say hello to, a long list. Hey, everybody. Daddy, Pastor Don Paulk, Ben and Vicky, Alita, Callie, Elaine, Miss Elaine Jellybean, Justina, hey girl, Emma, Joanne Bailey, Vicky Mullins, okay, Alicia, Betty Jackson, Rosaline, Miss Rosaline, hey, Miss Bobby, Terry, the Sauce Man, Fred and Mary, Doreen, Miss Sheila, Pastor Gloria Harris, Patricia Shepard, Lenora, Gloria Davis, Bryce Harden, Richard Copeland, Laverne Bryant, Pastor Cassius, Bradley Johnson, Anton Wallace, Esther Folks, Astrid Gadsden Jones, and Pastor D, who was not able to connect in, but asked me to share. Please tell everyone hello, and I look forward to connect Wednesday night and this Sunday on our 60th anniversary. Woo! Can you believe that? Spirit and Truth Sanctuary will be 60 years old on Sunday. So thank you so much for sharing with us today and for always being flexible and going with the flow no matter what location we are streaming from. I encourage you this week to recognize and acknowledge your divine nature, your God likeness, so that you not only are able to take back your own personal sovereignty, but that you're able to be that sacred mirror for everybody else that you come in contact with. Because even though a lot of that information that I shared with you today is depressing and frightening and sobering, it's not the end. The final story has not been written. It's not the end of the battle. We still have the opportunity to take back our personal sovereignty, to take back and walk in our God likeness and create for ourselves our own lives and a world that we want to live in. So, have a great week. Please remember to join us tomorrow night, streaming at 7 o'clock with Pastor DE as he continues the study in Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. So, until next time, I love you. Bye-bye.